Gratuitous cat. Hi and welcome back to the channel. If it wasn't for General Franco, this movie wouldn't have got made. Now I probably need to explain that, and to explain that I've got to tell you that Nightmare Alley was based on a novel by a guy called William Lindsay Gresham. And William Lindsay Gresham was an ambulance driver during the Spanish Civil War on the Loyalist side, and they needed a lot of ambulances in that war. On the other hand, there's not many wars where they don't. While he was working as an ambulance driver, Gresham met a guy whose name was Doc Halliday, who had worked in carnivals for many years before deciding to go and join the Spanish Civil War. Gresham heard all the stories that Doc Halliday told him, and Doc Halliday also told him how a lot of carnival scams work. So zip forward to about 10 years later, and Gresham wrote a novel, one of the great film noir novels, called Nightmare Alley. A year later, 20th Century Fox made it into a movie. This movie. Now, Tyron Power was a big star for Fox at the time. He'd just come back from a couple of years in World War II as a Marine pilot, and this was his second movie after coming back from the war. His previous movie had been The Razor's Edge, an adaptation of Somerset Maugham's novel, which is much better than the remake of that particular novel, which starred Bill Murray, for reasons best known to Bill Murray. The thing here is that Tyrone Power could really act, unlike many of his contemporaries. It wasn't a precondition of that particular role in Hollywood. So Fox made Nightmare Alley. This is before people knew what film noir was. It wasn't considered a genre until the French started looking at it in the 1950s. But this is one of the seminal and one of the most important films noir. In the movie, Tyrone Power plays a guy called Stan Carlisle, a carnival kind of roustabout, who gets fascinated with various carnival acts. He's fascinated with the geek, who is not what a geek is now. In those days, a geek was usually an alcoholic or a drug addict who was hired by a carnival to pretend to be a half man, half animal. They put him in a pit and then throw live chickens down there, and he'd bite the heads off the chickens. That happened in real life. Now, Stan's fascinated and horrified by the fact that somebody could get so low that they would be hired by a carnival to be a geek. Stan loves the life of a carnival. He gets involved with Xena, a woman who does a mind-reading act along with her alcoholic husband Pete, who helps her with the scam, and you get to see how the scam actually works, which is kind of cool. He also gets involved with a younger woman called Molly, who works as the electric woman in the carnival. There's also a strongman in the carnival, a guy called Bruno, played by Mike Mazurki, in probably his most iconic role. And Stan finds out that Xena and Pete used to have a very, very good vaudeville act where they did a mind-reading scam using a word code. So the intonation of words and the choice of words when the mind-reading act is being done would tell the person who is blindfolded up on the stage what exactly the person is holding up. That code is worth a lot of money, and eventually, through seducing Xena, Stan finds out the code and practices. He practices it with both Xena and Molly, who's helping him train to learn the word code, which Xena already knows. And then an accidental death happens to Pete. And Stan and Molly take the mind-reading act up market.
Can you tell me how this question is signed?
It is signed Mother.
Is that correct?
Yes.
They end up in nightclubs. They become very famous. He becomes famous as the Great Stanton. And that then leads him to an encounter with a consulting psychologist called Lilith Ritter, played by Helen Walker, who is also, in a sense, running a confidence scam on her clients. As things escalate, Stan starts diving into spiritualism and starts telling people he can see their dead relatives, and Lilith Ritter helps him start a scam against a very wealthy man who lost the woman he loved at a young age. This guy is kind of old. And he wants to see his lost love once again. So Lilith and Stan and the reluctant Molly organise for him to see the woman he loved. If he does that, he'll give Stan a lot of money. He can start a tabernacle and kind of go semi-legit as a spiritualist and as somebody who can see the dead and communicate with the dead and scam bereaved people out of money. Not that that would happen at all in the 21st century. Inevitably things go wrong, and we see a circle as Stan is first scammed by Lilith and then ends up on the skids and ends up as an alcoholic himself until things come full circle. This movie is being remade by Guillermo Del Toro, and it's going to be released later this year. And usually with remakes of classic films, I'm kind of not good with it. I really think that it's a scam in a sense that this gets done. But I've seen the cast on this one. It's got Bradley Cooper in it, it's got Cate Blanchett, it's got Toni Collette, both of whom are Australian. It's got David Strathairn, it's got Ron Perlman in it. It's got Willem Dafoe as well. So the cast in this one's great, and I've got a lot of faith in Guillermo Del Toro. But I wanted to review the original movie before the new movie comes out and the original becomes hard for people to find and kind of semi gets erased from movie history, which often happens with high profile, high cost remakes of classic films. Nightmare Alley is good, that's why it's got a Criterion edition. It's about a man who had an incredibly hard upbringing. He was raised in orphanages, he was beaten up, and then on Sundays they preach at him, so he's got that kind of religious background that helps him with the spiritualism. But it's pretty clear that Stan's a pretty messed up person. 20th century parlance, we'd say he had complex PTSD, but he hides it very well. He's charming, he's charismatic, he's a great con man, and he eventually comes up against con people who are working at a level he can't attain. Now, Tyrone Power is fantastic in it. As Xena, we have Joan Blondell, who's really good in the role as well. As I said, Mike Mazurki plays Bruno and does a very good job of it as well. Colleen Gray plays Molly, and Colleen Gray is really good as a young idealistic woman, and we see her through the progress of the film change and evolve and become an adult almost. It's an interesting kind of arc there, which is done quite subtly. And it's not the focus of the film, but I really like the way it's done. And Helen Walker as Lilith Ritter is really good too. She is one of the early femme fatales of film noir. Yes, of course, you've got Bridget Shaughnessy in The Maltese Falcon, but she's one of the iconic ones and doesn't really get mentioned a lot compared to some of the other film noir dangerous dames. Now, this was a big project for Fox. They actually built a 10-acre carnival on the Fox backlot and got a whole bunch of carnival acts and carnival performers to make the movie seem like it's set on a real carnival. And so they really put money and effort into it, and then something went wrong after they made the film. And that something was the guy who ran the studio, a guy called Darryl Zanuck, who didn't like the film. He thought it was grubby and demeaning and nasty, and he really didn't like it, and so he withdrew it from theatres. It was released again 10 years later into cinemas and really did well at that stage. But at the time it was made in 1947, after an initial release, Darryl Zanuck killed the film because nobody knows anything, as William Goldman has told us, about Hollywood. The other thing that Zanuck did, which is kind of unforgivable, is he changed the ending of the novel. The ending of the novel ends just as Stan gets the job from the carnival guy at the end of the film. It doesn't have the coda at the end where Molly meets Stan again. Now, I'm not going to go into spoilers beyond that, but I think it's one of those cases where Hollywood stuffed it up, but Zanuck wanted to have a happy ending at the end of the film, even though the novel has the perfect ending for the novel and perfect ending for the film. It'll be really interesting to see whether Guillermo del Toro follows the ending of the novel or follows the ending of the film. I think that he's the kind of director and the kind of guy who could definitely stick the landing on the ending in the novel. But whether 21st century studios are going to have an influence, and whether Del Toro himself wants to have the Hollywood ending at the end of the film, I'm going to see the movie because I really want to see how they do it. I think the cast is first rate in this remake, and I think it's going to be good. Nightmare Alley is also not the only work of fiction that was ruined by Hollywood studios. The other big one that comes to mind is in 1956, 1957, a movie called The Bad Seed, where they ended with a Hollywood ending after the kind of gruesomeness of the whole film. And the movies like Nightmare Alley and movies like The Bad Seed, I want to stop watching them right at the point where they should end rather than with the point where they do. And that's kind of my way of telling long dead studio executives that they did the wrong thing. I think that stories have a natural ending point, and I don't think all stories should end on the same 2 or 3 plot points. But Nightmare Alley, in spite of that Hollywood ending, is worth checking out. Tyron Power was a really interesting actor. He did a number of films that were really above what people expected of pretty boy actors at the time. If you look at him in one of his later films and one of his last films, Witness for the Prosecution, he is really good in that as well, even though he's not particularly the focal character of the movie. So thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you thought of Nightmare Alley if you've seen it. I put up a picture from this movie up on the community tab on the YouTube channel, and people were guessing which movie I was going to be talking about. A lot of people said Freaks. Some people thought it was a foreign language film, but a few people got it right. So congratulations to everybody that got it right on the community tab. Now I will be doing teasers on the community tab on the YouTube channel a day before I put out a video. So if you're interested, you probably want to subscribe, hit the notification bell, and give it a thumbs up if you enjoy the videos, because there are always going to be little teasers or little bits of information that'll help you with watching the videos on this channel. Again, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it. Everybody stay safe. By the way, before I forget, you can support the channel also at patreon.com/paleocinema. Melbourne, here where I live, has just become the place that's been more in lockdown during this pandemic than anywhere else on Earth. We're the Molokai of this pandemic in some ways. Nowhere else has been in lockdown for more days than us. If I can do the right thing, and I can get the jab, and I can wear a mask, and I can do all the safety things, after so many days of lockdown, you can too. And the battery just died just 20 seconds before the end of the video. So as I said, look after yourselves, stay safe, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Definitely watch some film noir movies and watch original movies before Hollywood remakes them. And I'll catch you next time.